4 miles from Independence Hall, Kensington contains blocks where every third row house is boarded, where vacant lots punch holes through street frontages designed for continuous occupation, where the grid remains perfectly intact around properties that no longer exist. The streets are exactly the width William Penn specified. The block dimensions are unchanged from his 1682 survey. The geometry is flawless. The city it was designed to hold is gone. Penn's plan was the most deliberate act of city building in colonial American history, a precise rectangular grid 2 miles wide and 1 mile deep, anchored by 5 public squares arranged by geometric logic, with street widths that exceeded those of any European city of the era. For roughly a century, it worked. Philadelphia became the largest city in North America, the capital of a new nation, the closest thing the Western Hemisphere had produced to a functioning model of enlightened urban design. Today, Philadelphia has the highest poverty rate of any large American city, roughly 40,000 vacant properties embedded in neighborhoods purpose-built for density, and a wage tax that drives the residents most capable of paying it directly into the suburbs. The most planned city in American history is now the opposite of what planning is supposed to produce. Penn commissioned surveyor Thomas Holme in 1682 to produce what no colonial settlement had attempted, a complete city plan before the city existed. The result was a grid 2 miles wide and 1 mile deep between the Delaware and Schuylkill rivers, with streets 50 to 100 feet wide, dimensions exceeding London, Paris, or any contemporary European capital, and 5 public squares positioned at each corner in the center. Penn had witnessed the Great Fire of London in 1666 and the Plague of 1665. His grid was built explicitly to prevent both. Wide streets functioned as fire breaks, distributed squares prevented crowding, rational geometry replaced the medieval tangle that had let fire consume 13,000 homes in 4 days. The grid worked. Philadelphia grew along its lines with a legibility unmatched in the Western Hemisphere. When the Industrial Revolution arrived, the grid scaled efficiently. Factories located along the Delaware waterfront, row houses filled the blocks in continuous density, and commercial strips followed the major streets. For 2 centuries, Penn's rationality proved rational. Most American cities whose street networks grew organically, Boston's crooked lanes, Chicago's improvised block patterns could absorb industrial conversion and highway routing without breaking a system-wide logic, because no system-wide logic existed. Philadelphia's grid was a total system. Every street is connected to every other in predictable intervals. Infrastructure, water mains, sewer lines, gas systems followed the grid with matching precision. Changing any part required accounting for how that change propagated through the whole. Penn designed a city that could be built. He did not design a city that could be rebuilt. Philadelphia's population peaked at just over 2,071,000 in 1950. The city was the dominant manufacturing center of the Mid-Atlantic, textiles, shipbuilding, metalworking, and light manufacturing concentrated along the Delaware waterfront and throughout Kensington, Port Richmond, and Frankfort. The Baldwin Locomotive Works was the largest locomotive manufacturer on Earth. The Philadelphia Naval Shipyard employed over 40,000 workers at its World War II peak. The city's industrial base was geographically distributed across the grid in a pattern that assumed permanence. Most American cities that deindustrialized had industrial zones, discrete districts that could be abandoned, converted, or rezoned without compromising the residential neighborhoods adjacent to them. Philadelphia didn't have industrial zones, it had an industrial city. Factories and row houses occupied the same grid in the same neighborhoods, which meant that when manufacturing left, it didn't leave a district behind. It left a city behind. Philadelphia has lost roughly 500,000 residents since 1950 and has not recovered. The decline followed deindustrialization with geographic precision, textile mills closing throughout Kensington in the 1950s and the 1960s, the naval shipyard shuttering in 1995, Baldwin Locomotive going bankrupt in 1956. The infrastructure that those workers required remained. Philadelphia still maintains 142 square miles of streets, a water system, a sewer network, and a grid of utilities, all scaled for 2 million people. A city of 1.5 million now pays to operate systems engineered for a population it lost 70 years ago. Every mile of street requires the same maintenance whether the adjacent properties are occupied or vacant. Every water main costs the same whether it serves a full block or a half-empty one. The city became trapped in its own design, too large to shrink, too empty to sustain. Philadelphia levies a wage tax of 3.75% on all residents and 3.44% on non-residents who work within city limits, the highest municipal wage tax of any large American city in the United States. Most American cities fund municipal operations primarily through property taxes, which tax the value of land and buildings regardless of where the owner lives or works. Philadelphia taxes income. The difference is not administrative. It is the mechanism by which a city either holds its population or loses it. The wage tax was introduced in 1939 as a temporary, Depression-era emergency measure. 85 years later, it remains the city's single largest revenue source and the single policy mechanism most directly responsible for accelerating the population loss it is trying to reverse. The mechanism is direct. Every worker who lives in Philadelphia pays a tax that workers in Montgomery, Delaware, Chester, and Bucks counties do not. For a household with 2 working adults earning a combined $100,000, relocating 10 miles west saves over $3,000 annually while maintaining the same jobs. The tax hits hardest on the workers least able to absorb it and most likely to leave: service sector employees, healthcare workers, teachers, the middle-income tax base a city needs to remain fiscally stable. High-income earners can afford to stay. Low-income workers lack the mobility to leave. The middle exits. The result is a feedback loop. Revenue decline prompts the city to maintain or raise the wage tax rate. Higher rates increase the incentive to leave. More departures shrink the tax base. The city cuts services or raises rates again. Philadelphia is extracting revenue from a population of 1.5 million using a tax designed for 2 million, and the extraction mechanism actively drives away the growth that would solve the math. Philadelphia's poverty rate of approximately 23% is the highest of any large American city in the United States, higher than Detroit, higher than Cleveland, higher than Memphis. Most American cities that carry comparable poverty rates are post-industrial cities with collapsed regional economies. Philadelphia is the anchor of the 8th largest regional economy in the United States. Poverty is not a product of regional failure. It is a product of how the city's grid distributes and fails to distribute the prosperity that surrounds it. Most American cities that contain extreme inequality have a legible physical marker separating the geographies, a highway barrier, a river boundary, a red-lined edge that maps onto a visible feature of the landscape. Philadelphia has none of that. A property at Broad and Walnut sits on an identical street pattern to a property at Broad and Lehigh, same block dimensions, same street widths, same geometric logic, but represents completely different economic universes separated by 2 miles of continuous unbroken grid. Center City, Rittenhouse Square, and Northern Liberties carry rising property values and high-income residential demand. North and West Philadelphia contains census tracts with poverty rates exceeding 40% and vacancy rates above 30% on individual blocks. The grid Penn, designed to distribute opportunity equally across 5 squares, provides no mechanism for preventing that geometry from hosting extreme inequality once the industrial economy that filled it collapsed. The fiscal structure of the city forces these 2 geographies into the same budget. Center City generates the majority of commercial tax revenue. Outer neighborhoods require the majority of social services and infrastructure maintenance. Every dollar, Center City contributes cross-subsidizes services elsewhere. Every service failure in outer neighborhoods increases pressure on the system's Center City funds. They are connected physically through continuous streets and shared utilities. Economically, they operate as separate cities. The grid holds them together. It cannot make them equal. Philadelphia contains an estimated 40,000 vacant properties, abandoned row houses, empty lots, derelict commercial buildings distributed throughout residential neighborhoods designed for continuous, unbroken occupancy. In most American cities, the dominant housing type tolerates vacancy passively. A detached suburban house or a freestanding urban building stands independently. Its neighbor's abandonment does not compromise its walls, its roof, or its structural integrity. Philadelphia's row house cannot do this. A single abandoned property on a row house block compromises the structural integrity of its attached neighbors. Shared party walls mean water damage spreads laterally. Collapsed roofs expose adjacent structures. Pest infestation migrates through connected basements. One vacant row house eliminates the street activation that the building type requires to function. It depresses the assessed value of every property touching it. The city's property tax revenue from that block has fallen. The municipal budget available to address the vacancy shrinks. Abandonment in a row house city is not a contained problem. It spreads through the grid in a contagion pattern that the attached building type was never designed to resist. The Philadelphia Land Bank, established in 2013 to consolidate and redevelop city-owned vacant properties, manages approximately 8,000 properties, roughly 20% of the total vacancy inventory. The other 80% remains in private hands, deteriorating on blocks that Penn's grid holds in perfect geometric order around them. The plan is still there. The buildings it was designed to fill are not. Penn designed Philadelphia to be legible, equitable, and permanent. It became all three. The grid is still there, unchanged in its basic geometry after 340 years. The density is still there, embedded in 400,000 row houses that cannot be easily demolished or converted. The fiscal structure is still there, taxing a city of 1.5 million at rates designed for twice that population. In Kensington, the streets are still exactly the width Penn specified. The block dimensions are unchanged. The grid holds its geometry with perfect fidelity around boarded row houses and vacant lots that have been empty for 40 years. The plan worked, it just has nothing left to plan for.